Hi everyone, my name is Olivia Satin. If you didn't know that already, which I'm pretty sure most of you don't, considering I haven't filmed a video or uploaded anything in almost 3 years. When I was a freshman in high school and I was around 14 years old. I'm 18 now and I'm a senior in high school. I look considerably different from the person that I used to be. You can go back and watch any of my old videos and see that I'm just not the same at all. So hopefully some of you remember me. I uploaded a really stupid video that got kind of big. It was called Ghetto DIYs. It's the worst thing I've ever done in my entire life. It was stupid, but for some reason it blew up, and that's where I gained a lot of my subscribers and my views on my channel. So if you remember me from that, hello, welcome back. Thank you for staying subscribed through my 3-year long hiatus. And if you don't know me from that, I already introduced myself. I'm Olivia Satin. I'm 18. I'm a senior in high school. And I wanted to restart my YouTube career. Kind of career. Can I call it a career? I wanted to restart uploading YouTube videos, and I felt that the best way to start to do this was by uploading something and working on something that I am extremely passionate about and that I can really connect with a lot of people with on a basis, because I am so passionate about true crime and about cases like this. So I felt that this was the best way to restart my channel. It is drastically different than the content that I used to put up, but it is what I am interested in, and it is what I love and am passionate about, and I know that there is a community of true crime people that will support me and support my videos like this. So if you are interested in true crime, then I would suggest to stay watching. But if you are sensitive to assault, if you are sensitive to scary stories, attacks on children, any kind of that, I would suggest leaving this video. I will make happier content, I promise. But this is for my little weird true crime people. So today's case is the case of Daniel LaPlante. And this one particularly, messed me up. It messed with my head. I read something about it almost a year ago, and it stuck in my head enough for me to research it further and for me to make a full YouTube video on it. So it's a doozy. It's quite a doozy. So I believe that we should always start with background when talking about one person in particular, because I feel that the way someone was raised can show a lot about their future actions, and if you are interested in true crime, you would probably know this already. Daniel J. LaPlante was born in 1970 in Townsend, Massachusetts, and he was not born into a very good household. His father was allegedly extremely abusive and would routinely beat him, abuse him physically, abuse him emotionally, mentally, sexually. Almost like a part of his daily routine was to abuse Danny, and Danny's daily routine was to be abused. He grew up this way for his whole life, and it would show in the way that he acted as a child and even as an adult. He would behave oddly in school, often weirding out his classmates. He was seen as the creepy or weird child all throughout K through 12, all of his school years. He was just seen as kind of the weird kid that everybody has in their school. One person claims that they were in the same first grade class as Danny, and that he was a troublemaker right from the start. He was stealing things out of other kids' desks. He was always being loud and rowdy and mischievous in the classroom, disrespecting the teacher, and just not being a very good kid. Now, many children often go through phases like this. I'm not saying anything like that, but it would show that his abuse at home led to disrespect of teachers and authority, and just a bad behavior complex in general. And another person claims that they were neighbors with Danny and would sit next to him on the bus and notice that he was always lonely and didn't talk much. So, being the kind of person that they were, they tried to talk to Danny, and he just made them uncomfortable. You know, when you're in a situation or you're talking to someone and your body is just like, I don't like this, get away, stop talking, like, back away from the situation, that's what they would feel every time that they would talk to Danny. His teachers noticed that he wasn't taking care of himself and was pretty unhygienic in general, and just wasn't a normal kid as they were used to seeing and teaching. So, in the hopes of getting him help, his teachers sent him to a psychiatrist. And this was, again, in the hopes of letting this kid recover and have a normal life and not be seen as creepy or weird or gross. So they sent him away to get help, but sadly this backfired on them and probably did the exact opposite when the psychiatrist began to sexually assault Danny. So this was the second man in Danny's life that he was supposed to rely on and lean on and find support from, that ended up completely ruining him and attacking him. And Danny would be sexually assaulted by his psychiatrist for a year of straight assault at every single one of his counseling sessions. So you can see why Danny had such a mistrust of authority and men in his life. He didn't have anybody to lean on or look up to. And because of this, at 15, he started a life of petty crime, breaking in houses, stealing things, you know, just kind of the basic petty crime that you often see children go through. But he had his own way of doing things. He would like to leave items in the house that were his so that somebody knew that he was there. You know, sometimes you can walk in and steal a bunch of jewelry and nobody would notice for a month because they don't touch it. But Danny would leave the house a mess and let somebody know that he was in the house. He wanted to scare them. He wanted to make sure that they felt unsafe in their own house. He wanted to let people know, hey, I was in here, and I hope that you're scared, and I hope that you're feeling unsafe in your own home. To Danny, this was a game. He would break into people's houses and just have fun scaring them. He would leave notes. He would, you know, just try to make sure that people knew he was there, and he enjoyed that. So at age 16, he obtained the phone number for the Andrews family. And it is pretty unknown how he obtained this phone number. Some say that he broke into the Andrews family home and got the phone number from them. You know, maybe it was written down somewhere and then took it. But when Danny began calling the Andrews family and speaking to a girl named Annie, he said that he got the phone number from a friend, like an acquaintance that both went to their school. So he began talking to Annie Andrews almost routinely. He would call her, they would talk, and they were getting to be quite good friends. You know, she didn't know about his life of crime. All she knew was there's a voice behind this phone number that's really funny and that I like. And he described himself as a tall, blonde, handsome, smart, athletic, super buff and strong guy, and she had no reason to not believe him. You know, she was completely wooed by this supposed handsome jock that was calling her, and they were talking on a daily basis and becoming really good friends. So she had no objection to when he asked her on a date. So he asked her on a date, and she said yes. And on the day that was planned, he showed up on her doorstep and, unsurprisingly, was completely shocked at what she saw. You know, she was expecting this big, strong, handsome blonde guy, and what she got was a scrawny, tiny, creepy looking, unhygienic brunette that looked like he couldn't even, you know, lift up a 10-pound weight. So she was just trying to be nice, and she agreed to still go on the date. And, you know, she had been talking to this guy, so maybe she thought, hey, this guy obviously catfished me a little bit. Catfishing wasn't a thing back then, but you know what I mean. But, you know, I've been talking to him for so long, and I like his personality. I like him joking around with me on the phone, so I might as well go try to have some fun. So they went to the local fair, and within an hour, Annie was making excuses, trying to go back home. And frankly, I don't blame her, because in this time when they were walking to the fair and walking around, Danny had found out that Annie's mother had recently passed away from cancer. It was absolutely tragic, but instead of showing his remorse and trying to move on and let her have a good night for the rest of the night, he would ask her constant questions. He would ask her, how much was she suffering when she died? What were the last words? What was her last moment like? How much were you suffering? What was your last moment like? You know, just badgering her about these questions about her mother's death, like an extremely traumatic experience. And he's asking her to relive it and give him these brutal, creepy details about, you know, her mother dying. You know, I don't blame her. Annie then tried to cut off all contact with Danny, said no to any more dates, went home, didn't talk to him again. But sadly, this was an unsuccessful attempt, and she would meet him again in a much more dangerous and horrifying situation. So Annie and her sister Jessica began losing sleep around a few weeks after she had first gone on the date with Danny. And this was due to hearing a slight constant knocking and tapping at night. So she would be trying to sleep, and all of a sudden, from behind the walls, she would hear this. Constantly. All over. Like, everywhere. In the walls. And they would go to sleep with items on a table in the kitchen, and then would wake up, and the items that were on the table would be on the floor. So, you know, Annie, not knowing any better, was freaked out. And I would be too if I just heard this constantly in my next to my wall, like at night, and then finding things in disarray in my room the next morning. So her and her sister Jessica were freaked out and told their dad. And their dad, Brian Andrews, didn't believe them necessarily because he hadn't experienced it. They, not knowing any better, thought that it was a demon and that they were being haunted and that the demon was making the noises late at night and, you know, possessing their house and moving things around. And when they told their father this, he thought that they were emotionally traumatized from the death of their mother and that they were doing it to themselves. They thought that, you know, they were moving the things around and claiming it was a ghost. And it got worse. One night in January 1987, they had And it got worse. One night in January of 1987, they had begun to hear the tapping coming from the basement and not the walls. So they knew something was off. They knew that this wasn't just creaks in the house. It was moving. The tapping was moving. So they went into the basement and, armed with a knife, you know, they thought they were going to be greeted with a demon, with something that was going to harm them. They went in the basement, and on the walls, painted in blood red, was, "I'm in your room, come find me." So, freaked out, the girls run out of the home, run to their neighbor's house, you know, beg the neighbors for help. They call their father. Brian Andrews rushes home, and he looks around, and he's like, "Girls, I know that you're doing this." He still didn't believe them, despite them being obviously traumatized by what they had seen in their basement. So he, again, just thought they were having trouble coping with the loss of their mother, and he just said, stop messing around. Stop messing around. Stop playing demon. It's not okay to do. So they went back in the house. Everything went back to normal for a little while. But one night, a few weeks later, the sisters were sitting together, not in Annie's bedroom, and then they began to hear the tapping in Annie's bedroom. So again, they went to investigate, and again, painted in blood red were the words, "I'm back, find me if you can." Again, absolutely freaked out. They ran out of the house, ran to the neighbor, called the father. Father didn't believe them. Same situation ensued. But this was until the girls refused to go back into the house, and Brian had to go check it out himself, that he went into the house and he noticed that the house was destroyed, and the girls hadn't mentioned anything about there being a mess on the floor. So, it was inconsistent with what the girls were telling him. It was far more damaging. The house was far more damaged than he had expected, so he thought, oh my God, there's someone in the house. And while me and my daughters were at my neighbor's house, someone was messing my house up. In the time from when the girls ran to my neighbor's house, I came home, was in my neighbor's house, someone messed this up, and it wasn't my girls because I was with them. So the most horrifying part of this story is what happens when Brian walks up into Annie's room. So he remembers the girls telling him that tapping was coming from Annie's room. The words were written in Annie's bedroom. So he walks into there and he's greeted with the words, "Marry me," painted in blood red. And that's pretty horrifying enough because the girls hadn't said anything about the words "marry me" being written on there. But to make things even scarier, and I just got chills thinking of this, he turns around and there is a boy dressed in his wife's clothing and his wife's makeup, wearing a blonde wig and holding a hatchet. He turned around and was greeted by a horror scene movie. That's so terrifying. So the young boy in his wife's clothing and his wife's makeup was obviously Danny LaPlante, and he was holding a hatchet. So the dad obviously tackled Danny, trying to get him out of his house, trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And somehow in this struggle, Danny escapes, vanishes into thin air while Brian is turned around trying to recuperate. Danny is just gone. Vanishes. So Brian runs out. He's okay. He survived the struggle, and he gets in contact with police. And the police, investigate, figure out everything that's going on in the house, and they also realize why Danny was able to escape so quickly and so perfectly. And it is because Danny had been utilizing the crawl space in their home to torment these people. He had found the crawl space that was behind every single one of these walls and had been living in them, staying in the house overnight in the crawl space. He was the one tapping. He was the one coming out of the crawl space when everyone was asleep and throwing everything around and dismembering the house, just messing it up, because he was in the house the entire time. Police found a system of tunnels that were created with the house so that air conditioning men can crawl through and get to the rooms that they need to for piping, insulation, all of that. Danny had been utilizing to go throughout the house, to travel from room to room to room, and that's horrifying. And while police were in the crawl space, they noticed that teeny tiny little peepholes had been, dug into the walls so that Danny could see Annie in almost every single room possible, just from the crawl space. There was little ones in her room, there was little ones in the kitchen, there were little ones in the living room. He had his eyes on her this entire time with the idea of tormenting her. It is not 100% known why Danny had decided to dress up in Brian's wife's clothes and wig and makeup. It is thought that Danny just wanted to scare the girls by acting as their possessed mother, their ghost of their mother, since he was so intrigued in hearing about Annie's mother's death. He just wanted to scare them and make them think that they were being traumatized and tormented by this demon, you know, going back to his routine of leaving things in the houses he broke into to make people feel unsafe. It is also thought that because he had the hatchet that he was going to attack them that night, but I don't necessarily believe this theory, considering he just liked scaring people, and I think he just wanted to make the girls think that their dead mother was being tormented in the afterlife and was miserable in the afterlife and was haunting them. Because of this horrible thing that he did and this crime that he committed, Danny went to jail for a year and was released in October of 1987, making him 17 years old. He immediately picked up his life of petty crime right back up again, but in November of 1987, he burgled a house where he obtained 2 handguns. And this is where the story turns from horror movie, super creepy, something you'd read on Reddit when you're trying to scare yourself at 1 a.m, to a real life horror and a real life tragedy. Andrew and Priscilla Gustafson met at Quaboag High School and began dating when Andrew was a sophomore and Priscilla was a freshman. And they were high school sweethearts. You know, they grew up, got married, all of these cute things, and they moved to the town of Townsend in 1978, where they became heavily involved in their local congregational church, most likely due to Priscilla's father being a pastor at the same congregational church. They had 2 children, a daughter named Abby, who was 7, and a son named Billy, who was 5. And Priscilla, who was 33, became a nursery school teacher. You know, it was a happy family, high school sweethearts, white picket fence, just a really loving and happy household that was sadly cut way too short and ruined by the monster known as Danny LaPlante. On the night of December 1st, 1987, again making Danny only 17 years old, he entered the Gustafson household while Andrew was away making business negotiations for a stake in the Gardner Hotel in exchange for legal services. He entered the Gustafson household and just completely terrorized this family. He raped Priscilla and shot her twice in the back of the head and eventually killed her by these gunshots. And he had used the pillow on her bed to muffle the sounds of her screams and the gunshots. And he then drowned the youngest son, Billy, in the upstairs bathroom, and then drowned their daughter, age 7, named Abby, in the downstairs bathroom. Danny most likely killed the mother first and assaulted her first to get rid of, in his eyes, the biggest threat on his attack, and then killed the kids just out of an act of spite and wanting to hurt somebody and wanting to torment somebody. Now, I have been interested in true crime for pretty much my whole life, and I'm not sure why, but this part just affects me so much, knowing that these children had to watch their mother be attacked and murdered. They had to watch this man do this to their mother, and then in fear they were drowned one by one in different bathrooms. They weren't even together as a family when they died. Like, it's so heartbreaking thinking of what these kids felt as they were put into bathtubs and drowned separately after witnessing what had just gone on. There isn't much known about the interactions that Danny and the children had, considering Danny refuses to speak much at all, and there are no other witnesses that were able to speak on the situation. It makes me so upset knowing what these children and this mother had to go through at the hands of this man, and they were all separate, and it's so heartbreaking. To make things even worse, police were not the ones who discovered this crime scene. Priscilla's husband and Abby and Billy's father, Andrew, was. He had walked into the house unsettled because Priscilla wasn't answering her phone, yet her car was still in the driveway, and he ran up to the bedroom seeing if, she was sick, and walked in and saw her dead on the bed and immediately called police. He knew something was so wrong. And the worst part is he never got to see his kids after they died because he was too scared to continue looking around the house because he knew he was going to find the children dead. He knew that his wife was dead. He knew that his kids were gone. And he didn't want to find them. He didn't want to see them dead. So he called the police and he just went away, and the police had to find Abby and Billy drowned in the bathtubs. And I completely understand why Andrew did this. If I walked in and saw my wife dead and I knew that my children were dead somewhere in the house, I would be too horrified to keep looking around for them. Police, because of Danny's, criminal history and basically all of this, they suspected him from the start, and I'm sure they had additional evidence from the house to make them know that it was him, but it's not reported anywhere. I couldn't find it. But they immediately suspected him, and they sent out a manhunt for him to only realize that he had escaped. So a statewide search had ensued, and he was actually fleeing, and he was a couple towns over when he kidnapped a woman from her house. This was all while he was fleeing. He knew that the police were after him. He knew that he had just committed this crime and he needs to go. But he decided to take a little detour, kidnap a woman from her house, put her in her own car, and drive away in her car with her in it. So he wanted to continue to harm people. He didn't carjack this car, push her out, and then just try to get in the car and flee. He wanted to kidnap this woman, and he wanted to harm her. But luckily, she escaped. She ran to the police, and police were closing in on him, and he freaked out. He was actually found hiding in a dumpster only 48 hours after the manhunt for him started. So he abandoned his car. He knew that they were going to find him this way because the woman escaped and she gave him the license, all that. She gave that to the police, her car model. They knew what he was driving. So he freaked out, got in a dumpster, not sure why he thought that would work, but police found him hiding there. And while they were gathering evidence from his dumpster abode, they found a hair of Abigail Gustafson in his sock, and that pretty much cemented that he was there at the crime scene, and that's the only solid evidence that they needed to bring him to trial. 1 year later, after that, after all of the court battles and all of these things, he was found guilty and sentenced to 3 life sentences for the murder of the Gustafson family. He got a life sentence for Billy, he got a life sentence for Abigail, and he got a life sentence for Priscilla, which makes me extremely happy because a lot of times you see criminals taking plea deals and only getting 20 years for the murder of one kid and 15 years for the murder of another kid and 40 years for the murder of another kid, and they just don't get the whole justice that they deserve for their lives being taken away. So he was served 3 life sentences, period, done, gone. But he has shown absolutely no remorse for his actions. He would stay quiet in the courtroom. He would just not talk. He had no remorse. He was a sick, sick, sick person, not showing any signs of, I'm sorry, Andrew, that I killed your family. It is obvious to many people and pretty much to everyone that Danny is extremely mentally ill. He's sick in the head. He doesn't think right. But to judges and to the jury, this didn't matter. He was still responsible for his actions. He was still responsible, despite being mentally ill, for what he had done. I'm going to pull up a quote from Lowell Superior Court Judge Robert Barton, and he had the case. He was overseeing it, and he's quoted as saying, "It is a horrible case, and if I had the authority, I would have given him the death penalty. He may have been 17 at the time, but out of the 150 murders I have tried in his 22 years of being in the Superior Court, it was the very worst and most horrible case I ever sat on." So that shows how heartbreaking and how much it had affected, these people that were living in this town and were, how much they were affected by it, that this judge was wanting to give him the death penalty. And frankly, I don't blame the judge. I probably would say the same thing if I had to sit in that courtroom and listen to what this judge had to listen to about the case. To make things even more disgusting and to make things even more sick, he has tried to sue the court system multiple times, claiming they had infringed on his religious rights. He claimed that he was a practicing Satanist and he deserved materials and books and items that he could use in satanic rituals that the prison guards weren't allowing him to have. He claimed, "This is my religion. I deserve these candles and this knife and this animal carcass and all this blood so I can perform my satanic rituals in prison. And because you're not allowing me to do that, you are infringing on my religious rights." Now, to me, this just seems like a way to manipulate the situation. This just seems like the classic psychopath trying to have power over those around his life. He doesn't have control over being in prison because, he was found guilty. There's nothing he can do about that. But he still wants some control in the situation, so he's going to sue the system and say, "You're infringing on my rights. I need this. You're getting me this. You're getting me this. You're getting me this. You are under my control. I have the right to practice religion, and I get this, so you are under my control." And all of these attempts has failed, by the way, thankfully. They just don't want to give Danny the controls. They don't want to lighten up on the reins, and that's really good. And another time, he had taken to court the fact that in March of 2017, it was ruled in the state of Massachusetts that minors cannot be given life without parole. That was a law that was put into place in March of 2017. And even though this was 30 years after his case, he stood up and said, "Because of this new law, I deserve a resentencing because I was a minor when I was convicted and I got life without parole." And for a while, it was scary because of the law that had been put in place, it seemed like he would have won. But thank God he didn't win. He's never getting out of prison. He still has life without parole despite being a minor. And I hope that he spends the rest of his life rotting in prison and getting what he deserves. So that is it for today's video. I'm sorry if it was a bit of a surprise and a shock to those of you that haven't seen my face for 3 years, but I will be doing a lot of these videos in the future since I do love true crime so much, and I hope you enjoyed. I will be uploading more fun content soon. So yeah, thank you for sticking around for so long if you have, and I love you. Bye.